Welcome to the podcast where we discuss all matters financial planning and investing. This content contains general information only and may not be relevant to everyone. Please contact our office to make sure and determine if this is relevant for you.
Hi and welcome to the podcast. I'm David Lockton, joined by my co-host Cole Eccles. How are you, Cole?
Good and softer.
Good. Today we're really talking about one of those things where we've built up our super time. Now it's time to enjoy the fruits of our labour and start getting some money to live our life, because we don't build the super up to leave our money in there, do we?
Yeah, exactly.
So, a lot of people talk about can I get access to my super early, or how does that work?
I think the misconception is there's three key ages. Misconception is people confuse Centrelink age pension age with retirement age, and that's age 67. So there's three key ages: 60, 65, 67.
Yeah.
Generally 60 is if you stop working, you can access your super. 65 is no holds barred. Everyone can access super whether you're working or not.
Yeah.
And 67 is when you actually get age pension age. But the misconception is 67 is your age.
Yeah, there's so many complicated age, because I know when I started financial planning, there was a transition that we went from 55 out to 60 before you could access super yourself. But to access it fully and change that around, you need to meet a condition of release.
Yeah.
So that's a tricky sort of scenario by itself, because people say, well, you can access your super from 60. Yeah, you sort of can.
Yeah.
If you're still working, access
There's
to 10%.
restrictions.
So there's restrictions. Once you get to 65, key date like you mentioned, no holds barred. You can take the whole lot out, do whatever you want. And then a lot of people think, oh, well, I've got to retire when the government says I can retire at 67, which is when you're either entitled or, between you go asset-based or income-based, needs-based, that you can actually get access to the age pension.
Yeah, that's right. Right.
Can you get it any earlier?
You can, but 60, like you said, if you're still working and you've turned 60, you can with restrictions, but it's an income stream. There's no lump sums and limited 10%. But then there's things like, financial hardship. If there's sort of medical procedures, you can do that. If there's financial hardship, and all those are limited to sort of $10,000 as a lump sum.
You'd be interested too. Like, I've had some clients actually claimed a fair bit more.
More than that,
So, like 30, 40 grand in different scenarios. So it's not a clear answer. So, if you've got family members that need support, like your kids and so forth, for mental health or different scenarios, there's actually different types of help out there. So, and it surprised me, because I always thought it'd be only 10 grand sort of maximum, but I have seen more come out. Yeah. But that's what you have to really prove. Obviously, you've got those, those difficulties and the needs base for it. Yeah.
And also people could be working. So I know on Facebook, there's what's sort of stopped now. There's a lot of people pushing accessing your super for dental care, which I believe you can. And there's a massive, do this. And then I read something the other day about Apple looking at that. There's a lot of people accessing for really, I think I read the other day, I know which super fund was, people accessing their super for cosmetic surgery, which is not allowed, but to get somehow they're getting around it. So, just be careful.
That's all the medical side. But really what we're going to talk about today is legally and the right thing. If you build up enough super and you decide to retire and all that sort of stuff, what happens to your super when you retire? Does something magically happen, or what happens?
No, your super just carries on. You've got to make a decision whether you want to start drawing on it.
Who tells you about that?
You've got to make decisions. Well, hopefully a financial planner. Hopefully seek that advice.
No, but are they notified by the super funds and that? I don't think they are.
I don't think they are. Yeah. No, I don't think they are. It's just, it'll just carry on the way it is, or you can pull it all out, or you can turn it to an income stream, which is a nice orderly drawdown of, like you said, you built your super up, you start a pension, it's a nice orderly drawdown of your asset. You choose how much income you want. There's obviously a minimum. You choose how much you want. And the big thing is,
it's not obvious it's a minimum to everyone.
No, okay, yeah. Depending on, again, it goes, and that's where it gets a bit tricky, depending on your age. So if you retired 60, you got to take 4% for the first 5 years. You get to 65, then it goes to 5%, and progressively gets more and more. You're going to take more and more, but there's a minimum, but no maximum. So you can pull out as much as you want.
You can take a lot. Like, if I'm getting down the track, should I take a lot? When would a lump sum be appropriate, or take an income stream? One of the interesting things I find about income streams, it can just replace people's wages, because they're so used to getting wages. So you can get wages as such an income stream from your super and paid on a fortnightly basis. So what's the scenario that I should go for either? Or just take all my money out?
Well, you could if you want, but that wouldn't be the wise decision. It's like you said, it's when, and we've mentioned this before, so if you've worked all your life and you've relied on an income or a wage and now suddenly relying on your own assets, cash flow becomes obviously key. You can put it all out and you can drive it. We know working with clients that if they're not on top of their cash flow, money just gets spent. So if you pull it all out tomorrow, chances are you're going to blow it suddenly. There's a big pot of money there. It's going to go pretty
It's
quickly.
dangerous. It's like when people win lotto. All of a sudden they got this bunch of money. They don't know how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And it just goes on, lifestyle items and, expenses and stuff. So like, I find a lot of time lump sums, like if you've got some residue home loans and bits and pieces and you need some bits, things completed, but then creating an income stream from your super. And if you've built your super and other assets up, that's all you'll need. And then as your super potentially comes down, you get access to the age pension once you get to 67 and so forth. And if you qualify, and that can really help you out and, sustain a really like an 80 and 90 grand income. And if you've got sort of 700-800 grand in your super, that sort of gets you to generally around the 80 mark with really good income, which most people are used to. So
and depending on the income stream that you choose to use you choose to convert your super to, if it's an account-based pension, there's flexibility. You can make lump sum withdrawals. You're not just stuck to getting a specific amount. So it's very flexible.
Yeah. So so you talked about the government age pension. How can people get access to that?
That they have to apply for, and it's quite it can take a while. So I always say to people, if you sort of 90 days out of, becoming age eligible, you may not actually get it, but seek out advice, because an advisor could probably tell you. There's calculators online can give you an indication of whether you may be eligible or not, is to then put that application. But you got to apply for it, and that's either going to Centrelink, make an appointment, or logging onto MyGov and making applications through, which is probably the quicker way to do it.
Yeah, I think getting the key part of that is getting in early, because they don't back pay.
No.
So if you're not getting the entitlement and it's a slow process, as soon as you turn 67, they're not just going to automatically pay you.
Yeah.
You have to qualify. And if it takes a month or 2 or 3 after that point to get it done, they don't actually back pay you.
No.
What you potentially missed out. Well, they'd be back paying a hell of a lot of people if they knew about it, right? So the age pension goes on your assets, your income, and it's worked out. And in conjunction with your super, for a lot of people's super is their biggest asset. So as that potentially slowly comes down, the age pension amount can increase. And what's a full age pension at the moment, for a couple?
Couple, it's nearly 40,000 a year.
It's 45,
45, yeah.
It's around the 45 mark.
27,000 each,
and a few cents. And I think a single's around that 25. Don't quote me on it, because I haven't looked at that one for a while. But it's the singles is not much. The couples is reasonable if you've got another reasonable amount of money. Because imagine living on 45 grand a year for a couple. It's not a lot of money.
Yeah.
I know some people can do it, but it's like the government's not there to make you wealthy on the age pension.
No.
So that's where it's really critical, if you have some extra money with your super and all that sort of stuff, to continue the the lifestyle that you used to in some shape or form. So really, what happens to, here's an interesting one, what happens to my super when I die? Who gets it?
That again, that depends on you, and that's very much something that gets missed. So you have to, take a step back, super is not an estate asset because it's a trust, so it doesn't actually form part of if you've got a will, it doesn't actually deal with your super. So you've got to nominate who you want your super to go to, but there's limit onto who you can nominate. So it's basically, under super law, it's someone who's financially dependent on you, and generally it's a spouse or your kids, or someone who's got like interpersonal or interdependent or financial dependency on you. Yeah,
so it can't be just anyone, or it's got to go to your estate and all those sorts of things. So if you don't allow for it, and depending on those taxable and non-taxable components of your super and all that sort of stuff, it can get really tricky. And going to a dependent, so from a husband-wife scenario, it can easily just switch to the other person. No big deal generally. If it's going to dependents, no big deal. But if it's going to non-dependents, depending on how the superannuation is, it can be an expensive exercise, and the government can win out.
Yeah, and that comes down that tax. But also going to your, if you, and again, there's, in terms of the nomination you make, there's one that if you make what's called a binding nomination, is the trustee, the super fund has to pay it out based on what you've stated. If it's non-binding, they've got discretion, that can just delay the process. I've seen one drag out for over 12 months and it was going to, so it's, in this particular case, the beneficiary was the mum. There were 4 kids all over the world, and the trustee wrote to every child saying, we're going to pay to her, do you have an objection? And they had to wait for everyone to come back. Some of them were in remote parts of the world. I think it was between 9 and 12 months before it actually got paid out. So it's one of those things where people just miss. So make sure you got a nomination on your super fund.
Yeah, a nomination. And, I think one of the big risks a lot of people do is getting access to that money early and not understanding how that's going to cash flow them. And I think a lot of people don't spend enough money when they get to retirement because they don't understand how the whole picture works. And they fail to apply for the age pension because they think they've got too much money. But they're just not sure. So it paralyzes people to actually not spend enough. You know, the government really wants you to spend your money. They want money flowing around the economy, and retiree spending is really important to keep things ticking over.
Yeah, and that's why the minimum pension withdrawal goes up if it's a current pension from 4 to 5, because as you get older, they don't want money sitting in this pension fund that's paying no tax. They want the money to come out.
Absolutely. So, like, you know, if anyone listening to this as well, like different super rules around the $3 million mark and think all things were going to change. Look, it's an ever-changing environment. But the government are going to get themselves in trouble if they try to mess with it too much on that. You know, and in my lifetime, I know like there will be some small changes, but I don't think they'll be massive. And a lot of people are fearful of, you know, what can potentially happen to the super. I mean, getting access to your super, really important, those 3 key dates that you talked about for most people. So if you're trying to plan your retirement and you're like 45 or 50 or 55, understanding how it's very foreign to most people. So educating yourself around these and how can, you know, investment property come into it, or shares, or your business, or whatever it may be. And understanding how bloody well it works. Like, we're in a fortunate position. We see clients building up, and we know if you give it love and attention, it works.
It's gonna get that.
And a lot of people don't see that. So their reality is from someone else's reality, or the news or something like that, which is not where you want to really be. So I think it's a really important question around accessing your super. And there's a thing you touched on before, you know, transition to retire, where it used to be big back in the day, which is still, you can access some of your money after 60 if you're still working to supplement it. And also there's some real tax advantages, specifically if you're in certain situations. It's not for everyone, but it gets to that position. If you don't have enough money to do SALSAC and things, you can save a bunch of tax by utilising strategies after 60. So it's always a great idea to get some help with it, to understand where you are and what are the options, because it's just so tricky. You know, and if your mind doesn't work like that, you can read one thing on a line, but it doesn't apply to you. You know, and have the next thing apply, and the next thing, and the next thing, and that's where it just becomes so complicated in Australia, between tax and superannuation and company and trusts. And
there's a lot of things on Facebook saying you should, you know, if you're not doing this, you know, you're crazy, and that's, you know, for a certain group that is right, but it might match you.
A lot of property spruikers are going on about at the moment, where you know, and it can fit some people, doesn't fit everybody. That's where, like, if you're talking about specific things, it can get dangerous because it mightn't relate to you. So, you know, getting some specific personal advice from professionals like your accountants and your lawyers and your financial planners who are licensed to give you advice, and, you know, they got liability behind that, not what someone says to you online. So, So anyway, accessing your super, you know, it's one of the sort of, when you've built up your money over time, that's one thing, because if something went wrong, you've always been able to go to work and replenish it. Once you stop working, you don't want to have to do that. So you want to make sure you get it right. So if you need some help, if you're watching this, please feel free to reach out. We'd love to help, and thanks for watching. And please share. Cheers, Cole.
Cheers, Dave. Thank you.